It's 10:20 now. I don't know whether you've seen these pictures. The first images of NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, they were released overnight. There was a big thing about it on the BBC this morning. And what it does, basically, it provides the deepest and highest resolution view of the universe ever captured. So why is that important? Well, basically, you're looking back in time. This is a time machine. You can look back in time. It shows light from galaxies that formed soon after the Big Bang, bending around much nearer galaxies as well, magnifying it, allowing us to see further back in time than ever before. And it just reminds you how far we've come in space travel and exploration since the days of the lunar missions. And what about before that, when any idea of going to space was just pretty much, the realms of Jules Verne, pie in the sky, if you like. Well, one man who truly believed it would happen was a gentleman called Leslie Johnson. He was from Mill Lane here in Liverpool, and he started writing about this in the 1930s. Well, I'm thrilled to say his daughter, Pam Reid, joins me in the studio, and author Gabir, who is with Pam, Gabir Singh. Together, they put together the father's memoirs, My Personal History of the British Interplanetary Society, Liverpool, 1933 to 1937. Great to have you both here. Thanks for coming in.
Welcome, thank you.
How exciting is this? This is incredible, particularly with these images that were released today.
Very day, isn't it?
I bet you were. It's a perfect day for it. I bet you were thinking, I wonder what my dad would have thought of this.
Yes, exactly.
Tell us about your dad.
Well, he always had an interest in astronomy and science, and as a young boy he would collect comics and magazines.
Yeah.
And then as he got older, when he left school, he had 6 months when he wasn't working. So he went round all the bookshops in Liverpool and he collected more books. And he ran this universal science circle in his own house for a while.
Right, okay.
And then when he started work in the January, I think it was 1931, he one of his colleagues mentioned that there was something in the Echo advertising for people who wanted to form a society called the British Interplanetary Society.
Like-minded people, if you
Yes.
like.
Yeah. So he went along to Phil Cleator's house in Wallasey for the first meeting, and then they had a proper meeting in 81 Dale Street for a year, and then after that they moved to 56 Whitechapel. I've got a letter at home, a handwritten letter from Arthur C Clarke.
Wow.
Age 16.
Arthur C Clarke, 2001 Space Odyssey, Arthur C Clarke.
Asking could he join the society.
Did they let him in?
They did.
Yeah, definitely like-minded. So how did, Gabir, how did your paths cross then? How did you find each other?
Well, I was looking at what was going on in terms of space flight in India. I was writing a book about that.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in India testing rockets. And his name, believe it or not, was Stephen Smith. Now, despite that name, he was Indian. He had dark hair, black hair, dark eyes and brown skin like me, but he really was Indian. His father was from the county town of Brigg in Lincolnshire. And this is the days of the British Empire, contacted the British Interplanetary Society, which meant contacting Leslie Johnson, Pam's dad. He was the secretary. Now, this society, the British Interplanetary Society, was founded on the 13th of October, 1933. And at that time, rocketry was really, as you were saying earlier, Jules Verne sci-fi type stuff. And what the British Interplanetary Society was trying to do was try to generate some sort of education and popularise the object, the concept of space travel. And this is in 1933. And at that time, if I can just give you some context. So we've had the BBC, it's been founded in 1922. And the idea of a lot of people listening to the same event at the same time was a phenomenon. I mean, up until then, if you were at an event, you had to be at an event, at a stadium, a theatre, or a cinema in order to be participating in that same event. And later with television, of course, you could be anywhere.
It just opened up the whole thing.
communication was an astounding thing. And at the same time, 1933, I think it's about the same year that Speke Airport opened. So aeroplanes, some people were beginning to see them in the sky, but most wouldn't have, actually certainly wouldn't have touched them, or unlikely to have been flown in one. So the idea of space travel was a really heavy step to convince people. But many people wouldn't take it.
Isn't this human nature, though, that, you know, we crawl, then we walk, then we sail, then we look up at the stars, then we fly, then we always want to go that little bit further. We've been to the moon, now we want to go to Mars, now we want to find... That's the frontier. That's real Star Trek stuff, isn't it?
Exactly. And in fact, Leslie Johnson, like Arthur C Clarke and many other well-known names in the British Interplanetary throughout its history. I should say that these kind of interplanetary or rocketry societies were popping up all over the world, in Germany, in Austria, in America. And Phil Cleator, the founder of the British Interplanetary Society, would make contact with these individuals. So it would be an international movement. And Leslie Johnson, like many of those early members, were writers first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And Leslie Johnson wrote a lot of science fiction and science fact. In fact, in his day, in his memoir, he describes this term, scientification. That's something which later became science fiction, and now we call it sci-fi. But in those days, writing about what you could do in the world beyond was really a very hard, tough challenge, because in 1937, Leslie Johnson wrote one of his first sci-fi stories. It was called Satellites of Death.
Satellites of Death. So it's all the Flash Gordon comics and Dan Dare comics he was probably reading when he was a kid, do you think?
Yes. Yes. And he used to get what they call remainders from America. America was way ahead of us with thinking about interplanetary, science fiction and actual travel. And they used to send over these books that were left over as ballast for the ships. So he'd buy them cheaply.
They were used as ballast, but he would just go and buy them. Yeah. How does it feel when you hear people talk about your dad in such glowing terms and what an important contribution that he made?
Well, it feels like there's still a connection with him, because he died 40 years ago this month.
1982.
And I was very close to him. So it's nice to think I'm still helping his memory live on.
Mm. The society, when they were together and they were popping up in different places, were they seen as, they're a bit strange?
Yes, definitely.
I don't want to use the word cranks, but...
That's the word my mother used. She said,
did your mother say, you're all cranks? Is that what they said?
She didn't use it about them. She said everybody thought she was engaged to a crank.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then Arthur C Clarke, apparently, when he met them both in London, when the society moved to London, he saw them to the station. It was a long walk in the opposite direction to where he should have been going. And he was very attentive and good to them. And then he said to Mum, "You're a martyr to science."
In addition to Arthur C Clarke, there were many other names. Carl Sagan, the American astrophysicist, he was a member. Robert Heinlein, the author of many books, including Stranger in a Strange Land. Patrick Moore, Sky at Night, he was a member and the chairman for a very long time. Eric Burgess, who was the Mancunian head of the Manchester Interplanetary Society, they all really did get together to promote the subject and the topic. And I have an email. Phil Cleator passed away in 1994, and I have an email soon after that from his widow, and where she says, "Oh yes, they really were." Including Phil Clarke, were considered to be cranks by a majority of the people at the time.
But incredibly important. I mean, you mentioned Patrick Moore there. Patrick Moore mapped the moon. He was part of a team that mapped the moon for the future moon landings. If it wasn't for these societies talking about science, talking about space, speculating to a degree, do you think we would be where we are now in terms of exploration? I mean,
no, that's the whole point, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the really today, Britain, like most other leading nations, has a space program, and I would suggest that it was started here. in Dale Street on October the 13th, 1933. It has had a rocky history, but today, many of the satellites that are in orbit around the Earth, some of the contribution to the Hubble and the James Webb Telescope, many aspects of the International Space Station. We've had Tim Peake, of course, a British astronaut on board the ISS. A lot of them started their story here. And it's, I should say that despite the fact that October the 13th, 1933 was a Friday, that British Interplanetary Society, unlike many of the other counterparts in Europe, which were amalgamated within national institutions and government, the BIS still remains and exists today, operates from London.
This could be a fantastic Liverpool first, this, couldn't it? Blue plaque, Mill Street for your dad, you think?
Yes.
That'd be nice.
Yes, wouldn't it?
That'd be fantastic. Well, so much has happened, you know. I mean, I'm a very, very small boy. I was born in 1965, so I was bought rocket ships and Saturn V Airfix kit when I was 5 and 6, and I don't remember Neil Armstrong, but I remember the lunar missions, 71s. I think they stopped in 72,
That's right.
right about that
mission.
time. So I'd be 7 years of age. So I'm like your dad, small boy, fascinated with the whole thing. What does the future hold? Where are we going with this? Now, there's talk about us going back to the moon. You know, there's no... Neil Armstrong's footprint, all the footprints are still there. The tracks from the lunar rover are all still there. There's no elements on the moon to blow it away and wear it away. So to go back would be just like the last day we left it. Why do you think we need to go back?
It's such a profound question. Same reason why we started doing this in the first place. When Leslie Johnson wrote his story about satellites of death, that was 20 years before satellites actually existed. Sputnik, 1957. And in fact, today, interestingly, is the anniversary of the very first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. He came to Manchester.
He travelled the world, didn't he? Ticker tape parades everywhere.
And he came to Manchester, of all places, this day, 1961, July the 12th. And he, just like Neil Armstrong, who followed in, they did world tours, because this is such... It really is like a superhero. You know, these are people who've done things that you can't associate with ordinary individuals. The idea of very high speeds, extremely high altitudes, weightlessness, they're phenomenal. And I think it's just an aspect of natural human curiosity that we will, be going back, humans back to the moon and to Mars. And I think, as Robert Heinlein in his 1950 book, and in fact it was made into film as well, Destination Moon, emphasised the role of the private sector. And that's something that really Britain's very good at. Private sector has always been, even despite the recession after the 2007 crash, Britain's space sector has been growing steadily and is still building a lot of satellites. So it's private, isn't it?
The Elon Musks of this world can finance this.
Absolutely.
Where can we find the memoir? Where can we read about this? And what do you think your dad would think about all of us having a conversation about him today?
He would love it.
He would, wouldn't he?
Yes.
He would.
Yes.
He would.
The book is on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah.
There we are.
There you are. My Personal History, the British Interplanetary Society, Liverpool, 1933 to 1937.
Yes,
Leslie
because it moved
J.
to...
What a handsome devil he was.
He was.
What a handsome devil. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if I can just say,
yes.
I know you probably fed up, but
I'm not fed up.
So authors, well, you haven't heard what I'm going to say.
I could talk to you all day. They won't let me in there. They won't let me.
There was such a fascinating story, because this book should have been published 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But sadly, Leslie Johnson passed away rather suddenly. But there was a lot more information that I discovered, which I couldn't fit into the epilogue. So this book is mostly the memoir, Leslie Johnson's personal memoir, with a preface from Pam and an epilogue from me. But there's a whole heap of other story about what Leslie experienced after 1937, during the war, after the war, what happened to the BIS, how it evolved, what happened to Arthur C Clarke, what happened to Phil Cleator. And that's been another book that will be coming up later this year.
There you are. Well, it's great to talk to you about. And one final question, and I just need a one-word answer. What's the oldest satellite orbiting the Earth?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's one of the American ones. But I should say perhaps the oldest one that should be of interest to us is Prospero.
I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'm sorry.
The moon.
It's the moon. Fell into the trap. Fell into the trap.
Prospero was launched in 1971 by Britain and is still up there.
Still up there. Great to speak to you both.
Sorry
to put you on the spot there, but there you
Lovely. Great fun.
Great to meet you both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.